name is Muhammad Helmi. My matric number 297493. I will present about the origin of neoclassical economies. The microeconomies thought of the marginalist was transforming into neoclassical economy. Neo means new. Neoclassicism apply new form of classicism. The neoclassical economies were marginalist in the crucial sense that they emphasize decision making and price determination to the margin. Neoclassical school in the quite unique compared to other schools of economic thought discussed earlier because they did not have five major questions. They draw on the idea of the predecessor, mean the classical and marginal, and develop their feature. The creative figure in the neoclassical school is Alfred Marshall. My name is Muhammad Helmi. My matric number 297493. I will present about the origin of neoclassical school. The microeconomics thought of the marginalist was transforming into neoclassical economies. A neo means a new. Neoclassicism apply new form of classicism. The neoclassical economies were marginalist in the crucial sense that they emphasize decision making and the price determination at the margin. Neoclassical school is quite unique compared to other schools of economic thought discussed earlier because they did not have five major questions. They draw on the idea of their predecessor, classical and marginalist, and develop their feature. The creative figure in the neoclassical school is Alfred Marshall.
Hi, Assalamualaikum everyone. My name is Elia Nadila binti Muhammad Fazli, no matrix 299266. So, in this video, I will explaining how the neoclassical school of economics extended yearly economic analysis. I will discuss three main points: value theory, monetary economic, and imperfect competition. First, let's look at value theory. When deciding the market price of goods, services, and resources, the neoclassical economists focus on both supply and demand. This is different from early thinkers. Classical economics mainly emphasize supplies, marginalize, focus mostly on demand, but the neoclassical school combine both sides, arguing that prices are determined where supply and demand meet. This gave a more complete explanation of how value and prices are formed in market. Second, neoclassical economics expanded the study of monetary economics. Early classical and marginalist economists paid less attention to the role of money in the economy. However, neoclassical economists, especially thinkers like Knut Wicksell and Irving Fisher, were much more interested in how money affects economic activities. They studied things like interest rate, inflation, and how change in the money supply can influence the overall economy. Their work helped shape modern monetary theory. Third, the neoclassical school also analyzed imperfect competition. Previously, economists mainly focused on two extremes, perfect competition and pure monopoly. But neoclassical economists realized that real market often falls somewhere in between. They introduced the study of market like monopolistic competition and oligopoly, and used marginal analysis to explain how firms behave in this imperfect condition. This made economic models more realistic and applicable to real-world situations. That's all. Thank you.
This section will compare more regarding the views on the theory of value, market price of goods and services from the perspective of Adam Smith, William Stanley Jevons, and explain how Alfred Marshall combined the idea of Adam Smith and William Stanley Jevons to further explain theory of value. We also would like to know how these economics responded to the following question: do pearls have value because people die for them, or do people die for pearls because pearl has value? Hi doctor, my name is Chu Peijian and matric number is 306438. Now I am going to present the classical school by Adam Smith. The most disconcerting problem faced by Adam Smith, the father of modern economics, was he could not resolve the issue of valuation in human preference. The water-diamond paradox is used to explain theory of value from classical economics. He observed that there are two kinds of value. Value in use refers to the usefulness of an object. Something have the greatest value in use have frequently little or no value in exchange. However, it has low value in exchange. On the other hand, the definition of value in exchange is power of purchasing other goods. Something have the greatest value in exchange have frequently little or no value in use. First, come the main question why water is cheap and diamonds are expensive. Water have high value in use but little value in exchange, even though water is essential to life, whereas diamonds have little value in use but high value in exchange, even though diamonds are not essential to life in this case. However, Smith himself did not fully solve the paradox of value because he did not understand the three concepts, which is total utility, marginal utility, and the law of diminishing marginal utility. Smith directed his analysis only on exchange value, which also known as value in exchange, in which he discussed his theory of value in terms of primitive society and advanced economy. Let's take a look at labor theory of value in terms of primitive society. Smith argued that in a society in which labor was the only resource, the relative value of goods would be determined by the amount of labor necessary to produce it. Value of any commodity to a person who possesses it, if he wishes to exchange it for other commodities, is equal to the quantity of labor which it enables him to purchase or command. Using Smith's deer beaver example, suppose there is 2 hours to trap a beaver and 1 hour to hunt and shoot a deer. What is the value in exchange of the beaver? The answer is 2 deer or 2 hours of labor. A person could either exchange the beaver for 2 deer because each deer requires only 1 hour of labor to harvest, or could use the beaver to command 2 hours of labor services. In primitive society, according to Smith, labor cost equal to labor command. Next, let's take a look at labor theory of value in terms of advanced economy. Smith realized that the growth of capital would invalidate a simple labor cost theory of value. In a society where capital investments and learned resources become important, goods will normally be exchanged for other goods, for money or for labor at a figure high enough to cover the rent and profits. Profits will depend on the whole value of the capital advanced by the employer. The real value of commodities can no longer be measured by the labor content in them. They still can measure by the quantity of labor which they can each of them purchase or command. As a result, the quantity of labor that can buy exceeds the quantity of labor embodied in its production by the total profits and rent. In summary, Adam Smith emphasized supply as the significant determinant of exchange value. For the question, do pearls have value because people die for them, or do people die for pearls because have value? Adam Smith basically answered that the pearls have value because people need to die for them, that is the cost of production determine a good exchange value.
Hi, I will present again about the imaginary school, the value theory, the idea by William Stanley Jevons. Total utility. Total utility, the total satisfaction a person receives from consuming a particular quantity of a good or service. And marginal utility. Additional utility a person receives from consuming an additional unit of particular good or service. Law of diminishing marginal utility. Marginal utility again by consuming equal successive unit of a good or service will decline as the amount consumed increase. For part story of diamond water paradox of total utility of water is high because it's useful, and total utility of diamond is low because it's not useful. Okay, what is water, which is a very important for survival, so cheap, and well, diamond, which are not essential, so expensive. This seems straight because water is clearly more useful than diamond, but the price is very low and the price of diamond is very high. Classical economists could explain this. They believe that value should be based on how useful a good is, so total utility. Since water is useful, it should be expensive, but in the real life, it's not. So this creates a paradox. William Stanley Jeffers, a British economist from the Marginalist School, solved this paradox in the 1817 using the idea of marginal utility. She explained that value is not based on total utility but on marginal utility, which means the satisfaction we get from consuming one more unit of a good. Jeffers said that water is cheap because it's very abundant. Since we have so much of it, the extra unit of water giving us a very life extra satisfaction. That's why the marginal utility of water is low, and so is the price. On the other hand, diamonds are very rare, so the extra diamond will get the stay valuable and give us high marginal utility. That's why diamonds are expensive. Dever also introduced the idea of diminishing marginal utility. This means that the more we have of something, the less we value the next unit. Because we use water for many things such as drinking, cooking, washing, and we already have enough of it. So the next unit doesn't add much value. But diamonds are rare, so each one still gives high satisfaction. In conclusion, Jeffers solved the water paradox by showing the price of is based on marginal utility, not total utility. This was an important contribution to economics theory and helped explain how price really work in the market. For summary, given marginally scored, emphasize demand utility as significant determination of price. According to Jeffers, cost of production determines supply. Second, supply determines final degree of utility. Third, final degree of utility determines value. Jeffers' opinion on the value of peer. Do peer have value because people need to live for them, or do people live for peer because the peer have value? According to Jeffers, people live for peer because it have value. Buyer get utility for them.
Assalamualaikum and a very good day to my lecturer and classmate. My name is Nuriza Shahira. My metric number 298733. Today I will be presenting about the neoclassical schools focusing on affirmation. Affirmation developed a more complete theory of value by combining ideas from the classical and marginalist schools, which lead to the neoclassical approach. From the classical school, especially Adam Smith, he took the idea that the cost of production influenced the value of goods. From the marginalists, like Jeffers, he adopted the view that utility and demand also determine value. Marshall argued that the market price is determined by both demand and supply. He compared this to the scissors, where both blades are need to cut. In the short run, prices are influenced mostly by demand and utility, while in the long run, price depend on cost of production. Marshall stated that demand is based on diminishing marginal utility, which means that the more of products someone already has, the less additional satisfaction they get from another unit. His approach also considers human feelings such as pleasure, pain, desire, and motivation. These psychological factors help explain why people buy goods and how demand is formed in the market. Marshall supported the law of diminishing marginal utility but added two qualifications. First, he said the analysis is based on a moment in time that is too short for any change in the person's taste or preferences. Second, he explained that the law applies mainly to goods that are consumed in whole units, not goods that can be divided infinitely. This helps make the decrease in utility easier to observe. Earlier marginalists said that the strength of a person's preference determines the amount of money they are willing to spend. However, Marshall turned this around and measured preference based on the financial scale of payment. For example, shoes may be twice as useful as a hat to a person, so they are willing to pay twice as much for shoes compared to hat. For instance, 40 ringgit for shoes and 20 ringgit for a hat. Because they are willing to pay twice as much, we can conclude that the shoes provide twice as much utility. In a money economy, he explained that spending will be pushed to the point where the marginal utility of a dollar's worth of good is the same in every direction of spending. Each person does this by watching whether they gain by reducing spending on one good and increasing it on another. Marshall linked this EQ marginal rule to the law of demand. Marshall explained rational consumer choice based on diminishing marginal utility. He clearly distinguished between changes in quantity demanded, which is movement along the curve, and changes in demand, which shift the entire curve. He assumed purchasing power of money remained constant. When the price of a good falls, two effects increase quantity purchased: the substitution effect and the income effect. From this, Marshall supports the law of demand, which states that when price falls, quantity demanded increase, and when price rises, quantity demanded decreases. Marshall defined consumer surplus as the difference between what consumers are willing to pay and what they are actually paid in the market. He stated that total utility of the goods is the sum of the marginal utilities of each added unit. The price a person pays does not exist and is seldom equal to what they are willing to pay rather than go without the object. For this slide, elasticity of demand measures how much the quantity demanded changes when the price changes. We calculate it by taking the percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in price. If the elasticity value is greater than 1, demand is elastic, meaning consumers are very responsive to price changes. If it is less than 1, demand is inelastic, meaning quantity doesn't change much when price changes. If it equals 1, demand is inelastic, where quantity changes in the same percentage as price. This links to the law of demand, which says when price goes up, quantity demanded goes down, and when price goes down, quantity demanded goes up. Elasticity simply tells us how strongly quantity responds to that price change. This slide summarizes the different types of price elasticity of demand. When elasticity is greater than 1, demand is elastic, meaning quantity demanded change more than the price does. When elasticity is less than 1, demand is inelastic, so quantity changes only a little even if price changes. If elasticity is exactly 1, demand is inelastic, where quantity changes in the same percentage as price. They are two extreme cases. Perfectly elastic demand means even a tiny change in price causes a huge change in quantity demanded. Perfectly inelastic demand means quantity demanded does not change at all no matter what happened to price. Overall, this slide shows how different goods respond differently to price changes, and elasticity helps us describe that responsiveness. Marshall divided time into 3 periods. The immediate present is an extremely short period where output cannot adjust, so supply is perfectly inelastic. In the short run, firms can change variable inputs, but fixed inputs remain unchanged. In the long run, all inputs are adjustable, and firms must cover all costs to stay in the industry. If price rise, new firms may enter. If price fall below average cost, firms may leave. In the short run, a firm uses both fixed and variable inputs. Fixed inputs like buildings stay constant, while variable ones like labor can change. Fixed costs don't change no matter how much is produced, but variable costs go up as output increases. In the long run, everything becomes flexible. All inputs are variable, so all costs change with output. As Alfred Marshall explained, this shift helps firms plan better and adapt over time. Marshall described market equilibrium as the result of heated and bargaining between buyers and sellers. At different prices, sellers want to sell more while buyers want to buy less. But when the price reaches 36 ringgit, both sides agree 700 units are supplied and several hundreds are demanded. That's the equilibrium point where the market clears and no one is left waiting. This graph shows Marshall's ideal of equilibrium. The point where demand and supply meet is called point E. That's where price and quantity are balanced. Above this price, buyers gain extra value known as consumer surplus. Below it, sellers earn more than their minimum called producer surplus. Marshall used this to show how both sides benefit when the market reaches equilibrium. The neoclassical school led by Marshall emphasized demand and supply as key determinants of price. He introduced consumer and producer surplus, added the element of time in analysis, and used tables and graphs to show equilibrium, price and quantity. On the value of pearls, Marshall said both views are true. Pearls are costly to obtain and people value them, so value comes from both utility and cost. Thank you.